Pamela Hartigan, many of you will know, worked with Gro Harlem Brundtland at the World Health Organization, then was a managing director both at the World Economic Forum and the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship, which is where I first came across her in 2001, and now the director of the Skoll Center for Social Entrepreneurship at the Saïd Business School at the University of Oxford, and also my co-author on a book about 4 years ago, The Power of Unreasonable People. And if you're looking for unreasonable, it's on my right. So Pamela, over to you.
Good morning to all of you. We don't need lists of rights and wrongs or tables of do's and don'ts. We need books, we need time, and we need silence. Thou shalt not is soon forgotten, but once upon a time lasts forever. That quote comes from best-selling British author Philip Pullman, where he wants to underscore the fact that we are storytelling animals. Indeed, many people actually believe that storytelling is what makes humans unique. So for the last 3 years, I've been part of the Oxford community. And it's a city of stories and those who have woven them. Young actor Will Shakespeare was touched by Oxford. Walter Raleigh went to Oxford. Gerard Manley Hopkins, Oscar Wilde, J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, A.A. Milne, Kenneth Graham, Lewis Carroll. And then, of course, much more currently, the Christ Church, or as Oxonians like to call it, the House, which I found out about recently, was the setting for J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter. So it's hard to live in Oxford and not be very aware of the magic of stories and how we use them to share our knowledge and our experience, to learn from our past, and to imagine our future. And that has made me wonder, what story will be told in 2812 about our current time, when the University of Oxford will double its current 800-year-old existence? I wonder what story will be told about this period of unparalleled difficulty for our planet and the people it hosts. How will it capture our mood of foreboding that deep and complex forces are rapidly reshaping the world as we know it? How will the story describe the new global landscape that is surfacing and the national and international arrangements that are now emerging to replace those that are proving to be inadequate to actually deal with the huge problems we face? Currently, we are living in a Humpty Dumpty world, where some of the king's horses and some of the king's men are scrambling, excuse the pun, to put Humpty back together again, while another group of men and women, committed, imaginative, persistent, with a strong ethical fiber, are working furiously to ensure that Humpty Dumpty model is transformed and gets replaced with pathways that achieve economic and social justice and arrest the destruction of our planet. We're in a very interesting time, as John says, of new thinking, experimentation, and we must seize this hugely important opportunity. The amazing thing to me is that politicians and economists, indeed an uncomfortable number of my own colleagues at Columbia and Saïd business schools, actually still seem to believe that we can and we should return to pre-crisis conditions. I've always been an optimist, and I guess that's because all my life I've hung out with unreasonable people, entrepreneurs, and it's impossible to be a pessimist about the way the world is going if you hang around with these can-do people. Their attitude is absolutely infectious, their energy, their ability to see opportunities for social transformation and innovation at every turn. That kind of entrepreneurship is highly infectious, and I welcome it. But given the stories that have assaulted us on a daily basis, even my natural optimism is actually often seriously challenged. If you just look at the stories that grabbed our attention in 2011, all year long we were told about the natural disasters that wreaked havoc on many parts of the world. And we watched the global financial crisis become worse as world markets plunged and as the sovereign debt crisis spread from peripheral countries right to the heart of Europe. The AAA rating of the United States was negated, or basically for the first time it lost its AAA rating, first time in history, and the grand European project is now teetering dangerously. Meanwhile, the enormous amounts of additional debt that the US has taken on since the start of the crisis has been sustainable only because so much of China's foreign reserves are locked to the dollar. And add to this Iran's putative nuclear program, a world population that is now 7 billion, rampant inflation, food riots, climate catastrophe, and now Syria. The litany of gloomy images, etc., is enough to give any Pollyanna room for thought. Now, I was asked to provide some predictions of where I see the world going. And that took me back to my childhood. It took me back, and it made me recall when it was the late 1950s. I'm 64. Late 1950s, and I remember my dad, who was a career ambassador with the United States Foreign Service. And he told me that he didn't expect to see the end of his natural life because we would be destroyed by nuclear war. Today, my dad is 99, so we still have a chance. And I also won't ever forget when we were living in Peru. Again, I was probably about 10 years old, 8 years old, something like this. And Mother Superior came running into the classroom, and she said, girls, the world is going to end in 1960. The Pope has just opened the letter that the Virgin Mary sent to the children of Fatima, and that's the message. Well, I breathed a huge sigh of relief when the 1st of January 1960 came around, but only to be reminded by my cruel little brother that I still had 364 days to sweat it out. Then, of course, we have, the saving canned foods in the basement because of the Soviet threat. And we had, the Japanese economy, and Japanese they're going to take over the world. Their economy is going to be stronger than anybody. We had Y2K, and so on, and so on, and so on. So, I totally understand why we want to predict the future. I think that's a very natural tendency in human beings. That's why every day we turn to the weather. I could never believe that. In Britain, where the weather's almost the same every day, people still see the weather 3 and 4 times a day. But there's that need to control. And that's why we also are drawn to reading horoscopes. That's why some of us believe in the predictions of Nostradamus or financial analysts, et cetera. Not that I put them in the same bucket. But please don't misinterpret me. It's not that I do not believe that climate change is a huge looming threat or that global financial collapse is very real, along with our energy, food, and water crises. It's just that predicting the future based on the past or even the present is a turkey shoot. As Lord Brown, who was former CEO of BP, noted when he talked about the price of oil, he said the following: "I can forecast confidently that it will vary." Well, that's pretty much the way I feel about the future. I can forecast confidently that we are and will be in a period characterized by fluid nature of relationships, policies, institutions, and human beings. And these things are all changing at an unprecedented rate and in nonlinear ways. My hope for the future comes from my past and current experience. I was a university student in the late 60s, early 70s, when ordinary citizens constituted the core of the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement. Globally, it was ordinary citizens who challenged the Chinese communist system in Tiananmen Square, the apartheid structure in South Africa, and led the anti-nuclear movement, the environmental movement, the women's movement, and so on. This past year, citizens' movements around the world have risen now to new heights in shaking the status quo, propelled by the newest technologies that connect them to one another. This movement of people worldwide is perhaps the most exciting global phenomena of our time. And it's our promise that we will not put Humpty Dumpty together again as before. And to me, this is where entrepreneurial approaches to social change come in. These new approaches are the harbingers of the organizational and business models that our compartmentalized world so desperately needs in order to integrate where we make our money and where we do the right thing, and to break down those firewalls that separate our personal and professional lives, and really reap the true value we all should be making to the world. I now work primarily with university students, mostly graduate students, and they're full of hope that they're going to actually find careers where they can contribute with their business and other talents to improving human welfare. They don't want to wait until they're 50 to give back. They actually, some of them are entrepreneurs themselves, while others, like young adults everywhere, want to work or contribute to endeavors that are fundamentally innovative, philosophically positive, and morally compelling. So how do we rewire our systems, our practices, and our mindsets so that our story reflects greater convergence rather than fragmentation of effort? That, to me, is the central challenge of our time. Because no matter where our journey takes us, that's going to be the issue we're going to face. In that sense, this global movement of outrage on the part of ordinary citizens against an increasingly unfair and unjust society, joined up with the practical, creative, and committed entrepreneurs, will ensure that Humpty Dumpty is not recreated, and that when my story, your story, our collective story is told, it will be about when we triumphed because human ingenuity, empathy, and integrity rose to dominance together to actually address unprecedented threats. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you. Thank you. Do stay down towards the front. Do stay down towards